Hello, my name is Dragos Axinte. I'm professor of manufacturing and the editor-in-chief of International Journal Machine Tools and Manufacture. This presentation is about what type of contribution we will welcome to our journals. So let's go to the first topic. So what type of papers we welcome? First, research papers, which are in accordance with the aim and objectives of the journal, of course. And this represents the great majority of the papers we are publishing. Then it's short communication focused on new technologies and concepts that are prerequisites for larger research programs. Then we welcome review papers, which are highly scholarly articles written by internationally leading researchers, and perspective, which we promoted nearly 2 years ago. Unfortunately, we have not published any any perspectives, which we intend to welcome academics and scholars to predict the future research direction, not for in the near term, but in long term. And here is an indication of type of papers, words and number of words, figures and tables and references which we expect for each one of them. And I also included here a guide for authors and an editorial from the editor-in-chief explaining what type of contribution we welcome. So now let's take step by step and discuss each type of contribution we welcome to the International Journal Machine Tools and Manufacture. So first are the research paper, and I would like to point out some essentials. International Journal Machine Tools and Manufacture is quite unique position because we are looking for science of manufacturing, and I will keep repeating this aspect. And therefore, the papers sent to us, they must advance significantly the state of knowledge and fundamental of manufacturing. And here we talk about in-depth phenomena governing manufacturing processes and machines, because we deal not only with manufacturing but also with machines. We are looking for new manufacturing processes supported by comprehensive explanation and their fundamental mechanics. So indeed, we received in the past some interesting papers reporting on new processes, but they were not an in-depth evaluation and in-depth explanation of the phenomenological aspects governing these processes. So those who develop new processes, they have to come and comment about the new aspects in the fundamentals of the processes, manufacturing processes, that their advancement reports. We also welcome contribution. We propose new analytical models, but not only for the sake of modeling, but to enable deeper understanding of the physical principles based on which these manufacturing processes run. So we are not looking for models only developed only to prove that there is a good prediction of the process outcomes. But the question is, can these models enable a deeper understanding of the physical principles? That is the question. Note, here I would like to comment that we welcome a submission to IJMTM, but these papers, they have been prepared for these journals, meaning that it happens many times that when we receive a paper, we realize that probably the paper is not particularly prepared for our journal. Why? Because we are very different from other journals in manufacturing. Because we are focused on science of manufacturing, and we can observe the writing style and how the authors put forward the academic problem. And that's why I want to emphasize the aspect here that the papers submitted to us, they have to be prepared for our journal. We also I would like also to comment that the papers have to be original submission. Of course, this is valid for all the journals, but they should not have been, the results should have not been partially explored in other publication. So if you intend to publish with IJMTM, please do not publish in conference proceeding or any partial results in other journals. So we also have the policy to follow very well what other journals in the field or related field, not necessarily manufacturing, but also those, for example, in material science. And we will like to keep the contributions we publish quite unique, meaning that we will try to observe if there are any further development or incremental development published in other journals. So normally papers in IJMTM should contain both experimental and theoretical work, out of which one or both should be novel. So first, either the experimental approach or there is research should be novel and advance the fundamental understanding, and or theoretical aspects are novel in their approach and reveal new insight of the fundamental of the process. So again, we welcome papers which use the modeling to advance the fundamental understanding of the process. And here I'm giving an example on a paper which has been published in our journal dealing with chip formation mechanism in orthogonal cutting of bone. So first, for example, here the model started from theories known in fracture mechanics, but after that it evolved in developing a unique way to predict critical uncut chip thickness from the energy released rate relatively to critical values. And after that, the paper also presented a novel way to experiment and evaluate the validity of this model. And furthermore, comprehensive validation with a clear explanation were given. So what I'm trying to say, both experimental, it can be novel, the experimental work and the theoretical, but if the theoretical is put forward, this should be used to advance the fundamentals of the manufacturing process, which is reported in the paper. As an engineering journal, IJMTM welcomes papers focused on experimental work. And here we welcome contribution which uses the latest development in experimental investigating techniques, those which can take advantage of these methods, new methods, to discover, to put in evidence new phenomenological aspects of the manufacturing processes. And here is an example of a paper which dealt with the influence of transitory heat induced in the tool and the workpiece during cutting of nickel-based superalloys, where this paper used high-speed thermal imaging with the EBSD and other advanced material techniques to explain how the deformation in the grain happens ahead and after, behind the cutting edge. So nevertheless, we discourage those submissions which try to report on known theories or phenomena only by changing the material. We receive quite a lot of such contribution, and unfortunately they could not progress because the phenomena and the theories, they were well known, but only the material was different. Traditionally, IJMTM does not welcome papers dealing only with the theory, unless they are supported by strong experimental work to prove the validity of this model. Nevertheless, very recently we have taken the decision that in exceptional circumstances we will welcome papers dealing only with theory if the theory is novel and an in-depth analysis of the implication of on process outcome is given. And very importantly, that validation of the proposed models are made using well-recognized and robust experimental results already published in the literature. We came to this conclusion by observing that in some cases the experiments might be so complex that is not feasible, that also the authors will develop an absolutely breakthrough model in the same time also to perform experiments of very high complexity. For example, I'm giving an example now, cutting at nanometer level, probably in situ on a scanning electron microscope. It's a piece of work on itself. If someone develops some new theories in metal cutting where they need this kind of experiments, therefore, if they consider, or the community considers, that this kind of work, experimental work, it's valid and robust, the people developing the model can use this kind of experiments to prove their models. Also, we expect from these papers that they will provide new insights on fundamentals of the processes, because again, IJMTM does not welcome models only for the sake of modeling. We want to use these models to explain more in depth the governing phenomena of the manufacturing processes. Note here, models constructed from parts of other models already available in literature are not acceptable. Unless there is a clear contribution in modeling concept and approach. And we receive here quite a lot of submissions which put together known theories, and actually this is a piece of work, could be very correct, but the novelty is missing. We also will not welcome numerical modeling, even with experimental work, unless these FEM are used to explain new physics of the process. So if FEM it's used for explaining particular aspects of, for example, experiments or theories, yes, but if the papers are focused only of using off-the-shelf numerical modeling tools to prove at the end that actually the respective model fits well with the experiment, this is not what we welcome. But if someone observes some new mechanics of the process and they need a piece of FEM, for example, or multiphysics to prove or better understand what happens there, then we welcome this kind of contribution. Unfortunately, IJMTM does not progress papers dealing with empirical modeling. These are very good tools for optimizing manufacturing processes, but we think that they do not reveal new aspects, fundamental aspects related to manufacturing processes. And now I would like to make some particular suggestions related to research papers. Over the years, we observed that while the literature review in the introduction is done most of the time well, most of the authors are not critical to in observing, analyzing the literature, meaning they only comment what others they have done or previous papers have done, reported, but they are not critical in identifying the gaps. Of course, if someone identifies the research gaps, that will be easier to put in evidence their research novelty. And usually, most of the authors write the introduction. At the end, they just try to present what is the scope of the paper. This is okay, and most of the time, after that immediately, they start with experimental setup. Therefore, sometimes it's very difficult to see the flow of the paper, basically from the literature review, scope of the paper, immediately the authors jump to experimental work or experimental setup. That's why here I would like to make a suggestion. Probably it might be useful the authors to present their novel idea, problem definition, to help make the transition between the scope of the paper and probably the experimental methods. And here I'm giving an example. Here, this paper reported on using a compliant tool, like a soft tool, which complies to the surface and reported on a modeling and a method to polish thin walls. So what are the authors, they wanted to make the comment, here I'm talking about left side figure. They made presented the SAG tool or the compliant tool against theoretically infinitely stiff workpiece. And this is the state of the art. And after that they said, okay, this is our novelty. We are dealing with a situation where both the tool and the workpiece are compliant with low stiffness. And of course, this part of introduction or problem definition, if there are new schematics, helping the reader to make the transition between the introduction and scope of the paper to the more practical aspects of the paper. These kind of figures, and probably they can introduce a modeling aspect. These kind of figures will allow identifying the challenges which is posed by new problem definition. So we suggest, if it's needed, this kind of transitional chapter should be introduced in the papers. So continuing with particular suggestion related to research papers. For experimentation, in general, the simplest and clearest way is to use the following formula. If the experimental approach is new, then emphasize its contribution to understand the science behind the process. New experimentation arriving to known science is not the focus of IJMTM. So if you make new experiments, but the outcomes are already known, there is no point to send to us. Experimental and method equipment, this needs to be supported by schematic images to explain the setup. For example, here, laser assisted machining, where the laser is swept in front of the cutter. And you can see here from the photograph of the experimental setup, it's very difficult to identify each element. Therefore, a schematic has been put in place to help the understanding of the experiments. If the test pieces are particularly prepared, then make necessarily schematics. For example, here it's in bone cutting. We wanted to show how the cutting edge is oriented relatively to the small fibers of the existent in bone. So a schematic has been prepared to help the understanding. So as a rule of thumb, all the experiments have to be so well explained so that other researchers can replicate the work. Making further suggestions related to research papers. If theory models are presented, actually the models should be presented only if a new theory or a development on an existing theory is presented. Comment on how particular parameters can influence the phenomena governing the process. So again, we don't need models for the sake of modeling. We need new models, new theories, which help explain the mechanics of the process. Of course, here information should be given clear about hypothesis. Only key mathematical treatments should be given in the main text. And we usually receive pages and pages of modeling work. sometimes very trivial derivation from one another, from equations and succession of equations. We don't need all this if the theory is not novel, if it's a construction of different models. And more than that, there is no need for all these pages and pages of mathematical derivation. Probably some of the parts of this mathematical derivation could be present in the appendixes. Of course, sometimes navigating through so many equations, it's very difficult to see what is the real outcome of the model. Therefore, there should be very clear statement which is the output of the model and how this links with the process parameters. As I said, critical mathematical derivation should be given in the appendix. So if there is a particular use of advanced mathematics, please explain it there. Yeah. And of course, care should be given to cite the original papers, and because we are following the literature, and we are trying to eliminate any false claims on novelty in modeling. So, continuing with particular suggestion on research papers, what we are not publishing. First, observational findings without new scientific understanding of processes or generic academic knowledge. So what do we mean by generic academic knowledge? Okay, someone has done a particular experiment in these conditions. What general knowledge, which could be used by other academics, probably in other manufacturing processes or in other setups, in other situations, what is this knowledge? What is the knowledge which can be transferred? That's what we mean by generic academic knowledge. Models without extensive and appropriate validation demonstration, we are not progressing. Incremental advances compared with existing published literature. And here, how we check it, we have a good number of strong reviewers who are experts in the field, and we check if this the work is significant advancement of the known findings. Of course, we are not dealing with empirical modeling, as I said, or numerical modeling, unless numerical modeling is used only as a tool to deepen the understanding of a particular aspect of theoretical or experimental work. We are also not interested in papers dealing with well-established theories, models, methods, or new setups, or proposal of another way to obtain similar, slightly improved process outcomes. So for example, here we receive quite a good number of papers dealing with path planning and how the interpolation are made, and we feel that these papers are quite focused on modeling aspect and geometrical aspects, but they are mainly some of them, they are mainly dealing with mathematical advancement or mathematical treatments, which make the relatively small improvements in the process outcome. We might not be interested in such submissions. And then also, as I said, submission dealing with parts, constitutive element of machine tools, without dealing the performance of the entire machine tool. We are not dealing. For example, in the past, probably 4 or 5 years ago, we received quite a lot of contribution dealing with machine slides or guideways, and basically some of the authors, they had a small setup in the lab and only the guideways of a machine tool and performing experiments. While this work is very valid for understanding of the entire performance of the machine tool, we will not progress these papers unless these findings from a single slide, for example, is translated to the entire machine tool, performing experiments actually to prove how for example, these models or this observation from a single element of machine tool translates to the performance of the entire machine tool. Now, let's talk a bit about review papers essentials, what we are looking. First of all, this type of contributions are written by experts, international experts, I would dare to say, internationally leading experts, who not only know very well the research topic and the technical developments, but they are also able to critically examine the state of the art, express informed views, and provide guidance, ideas for the future development. We receive quite a lot of proposal of review papers, basically with the tables summarizing what other researchers have been doing. This is okay, probably for a PhD definition, for a PhD student, for a PhD thesis, but this is not enough for a leading journal as IJMTM. So what we would like here, the authors to be critical in analyzing the literature, identify research gaps, and also guide the research community, not for 2-3 years, probably for longer time periods. That's why 4 years ago we introduced a new policy. The review papers, they are only by invitation, and usually the potential contributor should contact the editor-in-chief, meaning myself, providing the title of the review paper, and especially a detailed reason why, in the light of the state of the art, this review is needed. And this is very important. So the authors, the potential contributor, should be looking at the existing review papers and emphasize what new analysis, what new perspective they are bringing while analyzing this literature. And we also would like to receive a brief description of the content of the paper, including the chapter titles. After we receive this proposal, we will discuss in editorial board and will take a decision if the paper is invited for the full submission. This is very important because we believe that the review paper should be written by internationally leading researchers in the field, because those people are able to make critical evaluation of the state of the art and identify research gaps. So first, the review paper should deal with a hot research topic, and the authors should prove that they have a good knowledge and understanding of this particular area. Then the subject dealt should reach an identifiable and state of maturity, meaning there is enough body of literature reporting about this topic, proving that the topic catches attention of many researchers, and but we will not like to have a review paper on a technology which has already been implemented for years in industry. So it should be at the right time when the technology gets a lot of attention, and probably there is a need for a critical review of this body of literature to identify new research gaps to guide the community. As I said, there should be a significant body of knowledge already. The subject should not be too broad, otherwise it will be very difficult to make in-depth analysis of the literature. And also we very much emphasize the need of the authors to have a critical thinking of the literature, probably taking different views on what has been published. So in this way, research gaps can be identified and new research ideas should be given. That's why we so much encourage the authors of the review papers to have a final chapter or before conclusions to dedicated to future research directions. This will help the readers and the researchers, the young people, identify the new research direction. So if an international leading expert is writing such a paper, probably in collaboration with more junior researchers, the authors should prove that he or she is a leader and will be able to guide the research community. Or in another way, if the person would have 10 million pounds of funding, what him or her as an expert, what research they will be doing. So as I commented at the beginning, IJMTM welcomes research papers, review papers, and short communications. So what are the short communications? They are submitted in the same way as research paper, but should describe in concisely manner new techniques, concepts, and instruments. And this paper should not exceed 5,000 words, should have maximum 5 figures. The idea concept needs to be verified if model, if appropriate. And the content we consider should have a wow factor, meaning that it should be attracting the attention of the community. This type of paper has the same value as and the quality standard as a full research paper. However, please do not consider short communication as an easy route to publish. So the short communications should be crisp, sharp, and witty, so it gains the interest of the community, although the extent is shorter. Please avoid to publish full paper, research paper later on in an immediate period of time. So therefore, we consider that the short communication are ideas, nice ideas, which can be exploited fast by the community. So there is no need to make extensive research investigations if we are sure that what it's claimed is novel and of interest for the research community. It's a full similar as a full research paper, but it's expressed in more compressed way. So what they deal with new ideas that cannot be developed in full research paper. So you have a nice idea, but there is no point on making more experiments to only to have a long paper. Concepts and findings intended to be disseminated faster. That's the reason for it. Theoretical approaches that can be developed into a new way of thinking. This kind of papers we welcome as short communications. Now some aspects related to the reviewing process. We usually send papers to 3 or sometimes 4 reviewers. Usually for the review paper we send to 4 reviewers, out of which at least one reviewer is a member of the IJMTM reviewing community, meaning from the editorial board. And we take the pride that we try to work with the authors, meaning that we have, for those papers which we have considered that they have potential, we will go through 2 or 3, sometimes 4 or 5 revisions. This aspect should not be considered by the authors a pain, but actually they should consider that we are trying to make improvements to their manuscript. Now another aspect related to reviewing process. In their response to reviewers, it happens quite often that the authors start explaining and try to have a conversation in writing, of course, with the reviewers, try to persuade the reviewer that their point of view is right. So usually ends up with explanation of 1 page, sometimes 2 pages, only for 1 question. But what the authors should understand, they do not respond only to reviewers' comments, but actually they should give additional explanation to the potential reader, meaning that they should amend the manuscript in such a way that another reader, probably if the paper is published, will not have the same open question as the reviewer. And this is sometimes we can see that the response to reviewer ends up in many, many pages. However, making revisions to a manuscript does not always result in acceptance for publication. And we have a couple of good number of examples where people, we went to second, third reviewer, fourth review, and we could see that in one case, for example, every time the authors try to change the theory and views or the claims in the paper only to please the reviewer. And we observed this, and after third review or fourth review, we rejected the paper. Please note that we accept rebuttals of some reviewers. So sometimes we get also comments from reviewers reject. But we also encourage academic debate. So not everyone, we say that probably not a single person is in possession of the truth. Therefore, there might be different views on a particular problem. And I encourage academic debate. So it might be sometimes surprising that some reviewers recommend rejection. But if we think that this is more of an academic dispute rather than detailed discussion on detail, you know, we progress the paper because we encourage academic debate. We also recommend the authors to be short in their answers and summarize how the manuscript has addressed and the comments from. Continuing with the comments on the reviewing process. It has been observed in general for those papers which are required to be revised, the authors do not read with attention the decision letter. And here I once again, I'm trying to present what actually is written there. And we kindly ask the authors who progress towards revision to follow this ad literam as point by point. So first we will ask them to highlight the text where the changes are made, yes? Preferably with different colors for each reviewer. We will also ask to mark the lines of the entire manuscript and refer to the lines when indicating the changes in the manuscript. So in their response to reviewer saying, look, here I have 3-4 lines or 10 lines explaining the reviewer why I believe this is the author's point of view. And after that saying, I amend the text and there is no need for including in the response to reviewer that text which has been added to the main manuscript. It is much better to refer to the lines and the pages where these changes have been made. So that's why we kindly ask the authors who progress towards revision not to include the text which they have been added to the manuscript in the response to reviewers. And also for those papers which progress to revision, we also offer a guidance how to format the IJMTM papers, mainly how to prepare the figures, how to cite and so on. And this is provided in attachment when the papers are given the chance to be revised. So on many occasions we also observed that the authors do not pay attention to this document, because this will enable us to make a uniform presentation of the papers published in IJMTM. We kindly ask the authors to comply with these regulations. So continuing, on response to reviewers, and we kind of ask the authors to try to be short and indicate where the changes are made. And here I give an example of one of our paper which has been published in IJMTM, an example how to respond to reviewers. Why I'm giving this example? Because even in my decision letter, I emphasize the need to be short. It happened in the past that we received totally unreasonable response to reviewers, probably even more than 30 pages. One recent case, it was 70 pages of response to reviewers, totally unacceptable. It ended up with like a volume. That's why I took this extreme option to present you one of my response to reviewers in such a way that probably in the future we will receive response to reviewers which are of acceptable length, and we consider that in this way the authors should be show their consideration to reviewers who cannot go through 100 plus pages. So now coming to a close, I would like to present to you some IGMTM initiatives. We 4 years ago we introduced IGMTM awards for most cited research paper, review paper, and top reviewer. These awards have been posted on the journal website. But also probably those following closely the IGMTM, we have introduced the covers every 3 volumes, and we try to alternate them per topics. For example, this is hybrid assisted machining with laser. This is machining of thin wall structures by mirror milling. This is additive manufacturing. This is forming. This is additive manufacturing. This is machining. This is machining. This is non-conventional machining. This is grinding. This in situ burnishing. This is a cover for special issue. So how we select these covers for the journals? We look with attention at those papers which are very strong scientific content, but also those which have the potential to evolve into a nice cover of the journal. So please pay attention also on preparation of the figures, because probably you might be invited to prepare a cover for our journal, and that I hope that will be an additional recognition of your efforts. So I hope that this presentation was of use for you, for the potential contributors to IGMTM. And if you have any additional questions, please do not hesitate and send an email to this address. And we look forward to receive your strong contribution to IGMTM. Thank you very much for your attention.